Hello, um, back again to discuss my STEM bus field experience. This is for robots in the classroom. So, the topics that I'm going to cover today are how I helped, the technology involved, the pros and the cons, how I'll use this in the future, and what I learned. How I helped. During the STEM bus experience, I was able to teach a group of students from a classroom in Bloomington. I was actually able to teach multiple groups of students. My students were very intelligent in multiple ways. I helped them whenever they needed instructions as to how to program the Bebot robot. I was also able to help them figure out which parts of the Bebot robot corresponded with different parts of the programming. Technology in a classroom setting. During this experience, I used the Bebot to help students understand how to program different commands for the robot. I was able to learn the appropriate settings needed to program the robot in a short amount of time. I was not perfect in the programming process, but I was able to program well enough to let my students think that I was an expert, which I thought was pretty great. You know, idolization. the only thing I would change is having a more flat surface to be able to use the B-bots on, since the rough terrain caused the robot to just stop moving at some points. Here is the robot that I used for the experience. Right in the middle is how the B-bots look in their charging port. On the left is the B-bot like kind of moving through its command, so it's going forward and then turning, then going forward again. And then on the right, we had the different commands for the B-bot: up, down, turning left and turning right, as well as the clear button and pauses, and then the go button. Pros and cons. Um, I will have to say right here, I did have permission to take photos of the kids from the teachers as well as their parents to be able to include this in my reflection. And then on a different note, the pros and cons. For the pros, since the class was in an in-person setting, it was super easy to interact with the students and be able to hear them properly. I was also able to explain the different functions of the Bebot easily to the kids, since it was just a simple up, down, turn, turn. My students were able to program the robot themselves as it was very hands-on, which I liked, since I could sit back and not have to program it myself each time. For the cons, one of my students actually spoke only Portuguese, so I had to Google Translate to communicate with her because I felt bad just leaving her outside of the entire interaction. So I would Google Translate what is right in Portuguese, etc. I also had trouble with the robots refusing to move on a rocky terrain. So the table, we had these big tables to work on, and since they were folded in half, that little line in the middle would sometimes cause a problem, and if a student wanted to move in that certain direction, it would not work. It was also very noisy since all of the kids were programming their own robot and they were very excited about it. Like I said, what I could improve, what I wish I could have improved rather, was the working conditions and area that we were able to use the robot on. I also wish I would have been a bit more assertive with the kids to make sure that they listened to me a bit more. I didn't have that much of a problem with it, but once the kids started programming it, they got a little too excited and would just completely not acknowledge me anymore until I hey, it's Blink's turn now. And then for what I learned that for an in-person setting, I have to have a friendly demeanor at all times when talking to the kids. I would feel really bad if I turned around to talk to someone and then one of the kids would talk to me and I'm hey, it's Blink's turn to talk, and then the kid would get really upset with me. I also learned that some kids need a little extra help for programming the robot or just staying entertained. I did have one student who did not want to program at all, so I would just talk to her the whole time. But Overall, the experience was really well, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me to partake in it. That is all.